All right, everybody, welcome in. Have another now recurring guest on the podcast here. I am welcoming back Michael DeLuca, who is a certified personal and business excellent coach and the founder of Integrative Wellness and Development LLC. He is the creator of the Your 9 Steps program for goal achievement mastery, the Daily Goal Achievement Mastery Journaling System, the COVID Crisis Comeback Challenge, the 3 Keys to Your Crisis Comeback Mastery Program, and the Exploring the Wisdom in Your Dreams program. Michael, thank you for coming back on. It was episode 17 back in May that you were
Yes.
on the first time. So we're a few months later here. How have you been? How's everything been going for you?
Well, it's been great. And first of all, I want to thank you for having me back. And it's been a very busy spring and summer for everybody as we are putting the pieces together.
Mm.
Post COVID, and I've been blessed with working with some amazing people and seeing some amazing results
Awesome.
happen when people put all of their heart, mind, and spirit into pursuing their goals. And
Mm.
that's kind of in line with what we're going to talk about tonight. So,
100%. And for those of you that might be listening for the first time, or you've started listening after episode 17 when Michael was on before, definitely go back and give that a listen, because we went into the really incredible story of what got you, Michael, to where you're at today. And it's something that we all can really learn a lot from. And in our conversations, I don't think we talked about this much or hinted at it much even on the original episode, but in our conversations around that episode, recording that episode, we got talking a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, which is some of the things that you've learned and taken through your adult life, personal life, professional life, that you learned as a kid, as your dad was affiliated with a company affiliated with the Apollo space program at NASA back in the 60s. So I don't want to go into any more of it than that after what we've already talked about. Tell us a little bit about how that all got started and what that looked like. Let's jump into that.
well, for any kid, it was a dream come true to have any sort of affiliation with the space program. My dad
Sure.
worked for a company called Grumman Aerospace, and they manufactured the lunar module, which was the spacecraft that actually descended and landed on the moon,
Mm.
and then brought the astronauts back to dock with the command module, and then the command module took them back home.
Wow.
So my dad was involved with that program from its inception, and his responsibility was very much involved with the test data for
Mm.
every single one of those lunar modules. They called them the lunar excursion modules back
Mm.
then. Yeah, my dad interfaced with all the engineers, the design engineers, the engineers at NASA who
Mm.
coordinated, the preparations and the designs and the programming and everything. And then obviously the launches, the mission controls, and the post-flight.
Mm.
So my dad, saw this program from its inception and saw a dream. This was a dream of not only President Kennedy, this was the dream of pretty much every American in that time
Sure.
of landing on the moon first
Mm.
and making the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And so that was a big lesson for me as a kid. Was I watched human beings make dreams come true and make the impossible possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. And it seems nowadays that that feeling feels almost a little too commonplace. I mean, we all have those things that happen that are like, wow, that's pretty incredible. But because things that can be somewhat incredible, even just somewhat incredible, are in our face all the time, I think I think we lose a little bit of our appreciation for it. So I that is a huge lesson, the impossible becoming the possible when you're driven to a certain goal, and you're surrounding yourself with people who are just as passionate about it as you are, and you're working together as a team toward that common goal. How, I guess comparing it to something that we would be that amazed by today, is there a comparison? Like, is there a way, you growing up around that time and kind of, this, what types of things maybe in more of our recent past can you even equate it to, or is that still sort of the pinnacle of that example of your generation?
Well, it was such a Disney kind of time,
Sure.
As a matter of fact, my dad passed away in 2015, and when we were going through some of his boxes of things, I came across some film, and I remembered watching the film as a kid, and it was the engineers' concept films for how the moon landing mission would go. So this was the engineers in their imagination putting together these concept films with string and little toy spaceships.
Wow.
And it's they simulated the Saturn rocket taking off, and then opening up, and then the command module came out, and it turned and it docked with the lunar module and pulled it out of its little house.
Yeah.
And then proceeded to take that over towards the moon, and then have the lunar module descend and come back up, link up again. This was all with strings. And
wow.
I don't know if you remember the old 1950s and 60s movie, Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
Buck Rogers. These were, the little toy spaceships used in the Buck Rogers, television and movie shows, right?
Yeah.
So, that alone was very, very powerful. And I think today, we relate to, George Lucas and, the special effects of the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where the impossible became possible with CGI, computer generated imagery.
Sure.
Well, the space program was kind of like that kind of explosive possibility. You mentioned something that was really important, and that is one of the lessons I learned from watching my dad and watching, watch him be a part of history, was the teamwork. You mentioned teamwork.
Yeah.
People don't realize when President Kennedy made that commitment, it was full speed ahead, and we were not anywhere near ready to do what he was asking to be done by 1969. But it was the sheer determination, the will, the teamwork of people working together of all kinds of disciplines to do the impossible. And people don't realize there were dozens and dozens and dozens of engineers, many from my dad's company, who died of heart attacks.
Wow.
Because of the 7-day-a-week, 12-hour work schedules in order to meet that deadline.
Sure.
So it was quite a feat. And then, we'll talk a little while later about my dad was very close to one of the astronauts in the Apollo 13 program, Fred Haig.
Yeah.
And many of you have seen that movie, and we'll talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's incredible. There's another lesson in there too about maybe don't kill yourself over it, right? Work-life balance. However, not all of us are a part of one of the largest pieces of history ever, right? So there's something to be said about giving a piece of yourself to something that's literally going to change the course of the history of the world as we know it. And as you were talking about how that video that you found of your father's, something kind of came to my mind. I think the reason we take some pretty incredible things for granted nowadays, because the owner of, I'm going to forget his name now, the owner of Virgin Records, is it Richard Branson,
Yeah,
right?
Richard Branson. Yeah.
Richard Branson just made a flight into space and back on his own personal aircraft.
Yeah.
And that's incredible for a person to say, hey, I'm going to work with a team and design my own aircraft and help fly the thing and man it and all this stuff. But everyone for like 24 hours was like, cool, scroll.
Yeah.
and I think the reason for that is the technology those people are using, like people like him, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they're using technology that's still beyond our time because they're on the cusp of developing it, but it comes at such more of a rapid pace now. And yes, it takes an immense amount of brain power, willpower, teamwork, just as it did back then, to do those things and do them right. But it's a little easier and takes a little bit of the holy cow, I can't believe they did that out of it, because of, like you said, there's CGI, they can track trajectories. They can get things down to the millionth decimal of precision with help of what we have nowadays. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with it nowadays. And I think it's unfortunate that it takes away from, again, the sheer determination and grit and hard work that it takes to accomplish something that no one else has done before.
Yeah, the Apollo program, the computers, the limited computers they had to work with for actual, calculations and guidance of the spacecraft, a calculator 20 years ago had more computing power than what these things had. So there was so much that had to rely on the ingenuity and the brain power. A lot of the calculations were done with slide rules and engineering and chalkboards and really old school to accomplish what they accomplished with old school technology. But it showed you the power of the human mind and the power of a committed group of people, committed heart, mind, and soul to get things done. I'll never forget that night, 1969, when the Eagle, the lunar module, landed on the moon. It was the first time I ever saw my dad cry.
Wow.
It was absolute tears of not only pride and joy and exhaustion and
sure,
but it was like everything we did, it worked. And people don't realize Neil Armstrong, he dead stick that in. It was not the computer guiding the Eagle to the landing on the moon. He had one shot left. The couple of things that they had tried weren't working. He had just enough fuel in the descent stage to do one more landing, and sheer grit and piloting skills and just that right stuff that pilots have and astronauts have. He landed that sucker, and that was one chance he had, and that was it. And so it's stuff like that that made that time and such a very special time.
And I think there's, as you talked about that a little bit more, things are a little less surprising nowadays because of all the technology we do have, right? They're still incredible when big feats like that happen. But when you really look at how they were doing it and what they were working with, and the fact that the most technologically advanced things they had were really the materials they were working with to build the ship, but they had to build it with science that was just the old-fashioned science, doing physics and calculus on a chalkboard and to scale drawings and things like that. It's pretty incredible. But I think that segues us, what you just said segues us well into talking a little bit about lessons learned from like the astronauts themselves, because that sort of clutch gene that you just talked about.
Yes.
It's certainly something that you can kind of learn and grow into to a degree over time. But there are some people that just kind of have it. And if you don't necessarily have it, there are certainly ways that you can bolster that and learn from mistakes and make adjustments and things over time. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about your interaction, some of the lessons you learned from those astronauts of that Apollo program.
Yeah, I think astronauts and test pilots and fighter pilots, and I had a chance to interact with test pilots and fighter pilots. My dad had a chance to interact with pretty much all the astronauts at one time or another that were involved in the lunar module aspect of the missions.
Yeah.
But there is something about discipline, right? Developing the discipline and the focus that is required in order to do what needs to be done at the exact time it needs to be done.
Sure.
The dedication to training, the dedication to making yourself as good as possible at your craft, at your art, decisiveness, right? These pilots, test pilots, and astronauts had to make split decisions, tough decisions, sometimes decisions that your checklist didn't cover.
Sure.
And, I was a pilot, a private pilot, but every pilot lives and dies by your checklist.
Sure.
And by your training and your instruments, right?
Right.
And then I think the biggest thing was not only do you rely on your dedication, your training, your trust in your aircraft, trust in the craft itself and the people who built it, but trust in your teammates, right? And if you know any elite warriors of any sort,
Sure.
special forces, SEAL team members, Rangers, the amount that they rely on the person to either side of them to help each other survive is, astronomical, literally.
Yeah.
And so, that's why the Apollo 13 crew survived. It was teamwork. It was the dedication, the discipline, and the teamwork to come up with that Hail Mary solution. And for those of you who are too young to know what happened back then, actually last year I think was the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13.
Yeah.
But what happened was the life support system in the command module, when the command module and the lunar module were heading towards the moon, the life support system in the command module failed. There was a short, an explosion, the electric capability and the oxygen capability had been compromised. And they were not going to be able to survive in that command module for the ride back to Earth. And so everybody scrambled to come up with a solution. And both, the astronauts who were trained in the use of the lunar module,
sure,
the Grumman aerospace engineers that my dad worked with, and the NASA engineers and the other Apollo astronauts got their heads together and in a last ditch effort realized we could jury rig the survival mechanisms, life support mechanisms from the lunar module and allow the astronauts to live off of that from going from the halfway mark back to Earth and then jettisoning the lunar module and then just entering the Earth's atmosphere in the capsule. The recovery capsule.
Sure.
Had never been dreamed of. No one ever thought of that. But in a crunch,
yeah,
when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Yeah, and even beyond just having to rely on the team, the level of trust that took, that the brains in that spaceship and the brains back at the command center were what they came up with was going to work is real important, because if there's any doubt or self-doubt up there in that module or down in the command center, and you stall at all because of that self-doubt in one person or a small group of people, that could mean total disaster in a situation like that.
Yeah. Well, again, it's I think it's the dedication, the teamwork, and the understanding that we all live and survive by working together. And this message is extremely important right now.
Yes.
there is so much division in our country. There is so much, focus on our differences and on ideology and on really every man or woman for themselves versus, the good of the whole. And, it's lessons like this that you look back on and say, these are some of our finest moments, because there wasn't any finger pointing between, the company that made the lunar module and the company that made the command module, which faltered, and the NASA astronauts and mission. There was no finger pointing. It was all, let's work together and let's save our men, because we leave nobody behind.
Right.
This is the creed of elite warriors and elite pilots and elite astronauts. To the end, we leave no one behind.
Yes.
We should be all thinking that, whether we're civilians or military or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is, we have to work together as one.
Right.
One people, right?
100%. Yeah. Times do change, and we do have to change with the times, because, living in the past in some instances is not a good way to move forward. Taking lessons from it is fantastic, but I think there are certain things that stand the test of time. And what you just said is a prime example of that not only relying on, but being there for the people to your left, to your right, and having trust in the people that you have to work with on a daily basis to reach that common goal is huge. But even outside of a teamwork perspective, just in a societal perspective, having that same type of mentality, it goes, you don't necessarily have to trust every stranger that you don't know, right? I mean, it
could be very, very dangerous.
That could be very dangerous. However, looking at humanity more as somewhat of a team itself, and not as one side versus another, or the people I agree with and the people I don't, can go a long way for us. And that's going to be true no matter what decade we're talking about, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It is definitely one of those timeless things. And again, my journey, having, gone from living in the street to, building a wonderful career and a beautiful family and, security and a retirement, and now this business. There are so many people who showed me kindness and believed in me and helped me.
Sure.
That I wouldn't be here talking with you had it not been for them, as well as, my family and other people. So it's important to recognize we are really all one family.
Yeah.
Right. And it's important not to forget that, regardless of what country you're from, your ethnicity, your race, creed, color, sex, we are all one family.
Yeah.
And we need desperately to be thinking that way and acting that way. And, the example of these brave and adventurous and disciplined people is still a great example. I had over the years, a lot of people say, why do we waste all of this money, in the space program when it could have been put to other use?
Sure.
People don't realize we'd all be speaking Russian right now had we not been the first to land on the moon.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, some of the greatest developments in medicine, like technology for heart monitoring and defibrillation and heart shocking, automatic pacemaker technology, automatic pumps for diabetes, dialysis, space age materials being used in fabric, construction,
sure.
cordless tools, even, solar panels. That all came from the Apollo program.
Yeah.
Discoveries and advancements in medicine and technology. And, we sometimes forget that there are so many residual benefits that come from pushing the envelope and going where no one has gone before.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we also have to think about the military benefits and the military advancements, because unfortunately, we live on a warring planet, and
Mm,
we do need to, be sure that we can maintain and defend
right.
uh, our country. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, all of those programs, the space program, along with the military, are responsible for a lot of the major medical advancements that we have, because when things arise in those situations and they need to be handled, you can't have equipment that's going to fail you. You can't have procedures that don't work as well as what a new procedure might. And as much as people might gripe about the amount of money that our government spends on those things, the ability for those advancements to take place that then bleed over into society rather quickly. They probably get a little more refined, but before that advancement over to society happens. But yeah, you're right. There's a very big list of things that have been developed both in the medical field and just in a lot of the technology that we use on a day-to-day basis that started
sure.
in the military, the special forces, the space program,
Yeah.
all of those areas. Yeah. Yeah. So uh, speaking a little bit more to maybe some specific things that you learned from your interaction, your dad's interaction as well, specifically with the astronauts and their path to get there, because I'm not sure a lot of people, and I say this because I myself I know a little bit about where some of those folks sort of come from into those space programs, because over the years, some of the bigger stories, like the tragedy with the Challenger and things like that, we've learned a lot about the backgrounds of these type of astronauts and things like that. But that Apollo program is really the set the standard of where folks that pilot those vessels come from. So what were some of their sort of stories, and how did you learn from them when your dad was involved with them?
Well, they did have a common background, and that was pretty much every single member of the Apollo, astronaut community were the elite, top of the line military pilots.
Mm,
Okay. They were the best of the best in Marine, Navy, and Air Force, pilot populations.
yeah.
And they had to be exceptional pilots. They had to have exceptional technical skills, because, being a jet pilot, even in the 1960s, you were sort of a hybrid of a superior pilot,
Mm,
piloting skills, an aerodynamics engineer,
yeah.
a jet propulsion engineer, a computer engineer.
Mm,
You were this incredible combination of skills that you were superhuman.
mm,
The physicality, as a doctor of physical therapy, the amount of physical conditioning these men had to go through to
mm,
survive the effects of G forces, from being propelled at, these speeds.
mm,
These were exceptionally dedicated people. Even our fighter pilots today, they are exceptional, beings.
yeah.
These were truly people dedicated to being the best of the best in what they did, and it was very competitive. They were all
Mm,
competing for who was going to go up in a mission, who was going to walk on the moon, and who was going to be piloting the command module. It was
yeah.
very competitive.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's kind of a common, theme, and I know my dad, all of them that he met, they had the right stuff.
Mm,
But also, what was really interesting, because he had a viewpoint that you don't see in the movies, but he sat down with coffee and donuts with pretty much all the astronauts that were involved with the lunar module aspect, the landing on the moon. Those astronauts,
mm,
they lived at the Grumman's facilities for a long time, getting to know their particular craft, going through all of the test data, going through all of the manuals, and talking to the engineers, and
mm,
sucking in every bit of information they could, because their life was going to depend on that machine,
right.
and the nation was depending on them
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of really exceptional individual you had there. They were supermen and women,
Mm,
supermen. And there were women who went through the same training that men did,
mm,
but just did not get to, go into space.
sure.
We were of a less evolved and a less wise time back then, but
Sure.
there were women who went through the same training, had the same piloting skills, the same physicality,
Mm.
physical capabilities, and the same, intelligence.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That kind of speaks to our point of certain things stand the test of time, and there are some things we need to learn from and and leave in the past right there. Yeah, that's incredible, and I think that that's always those things you just mentioned are always an important thing to note, because not everybody has the right stuff, as you've so well put it here, to do that, right? Right. But I think everyone has the right stuff to do what they're really meant to be great at, right? So
Exactly.
finding that is key, right? Not everybody is going to be a NASA astronaut. Not everyone's going to be a fighter pilot, a Navy SEAL. Not everyone's going to be, like we talk about sports, not everyone's going to be Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, right? Not every, those are generational type individuals. But if you have a drive for something, and a dose of competition is great, as long as the competition doesn't derail you, right? It's going to be a healthy dose of competition, but having a competitive drive, even just with yourself, to be better at what you're trying to
Yes.
accomplish is really important. So you might not be historically the greatest of all time in any one thing, but within what you do, within your circles, within your audience, within your family, your town, your state, whatever, you very well can be. We all have that in us with what we're meant to be doing. We just got to find that, and when we find it, we gotta latch on and run with it. Kind of put our head down and go get through it no matter what, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's your point is really important. And that is, we can all experience greatness
Mm,
in the impact that we make on other people's lives and the
mm,
impact that we make on the world through
mm,
simple acts. Sometimes it's just giving it our all, trying our best, and showing up every day and giving 100%, right?
mm.
You may not be the superstar recognized by the media and, fans and all of that, but,
Sure.
great people are recognized publicly for what they do privately to
Mm,
prepare.
right.
And we can all prepare like champions every day if
Every
we're
day.
committed to something, to be
Mm,
something, to find greatness inside of ourselves, to push the envelope, to do the unthinkable. As a quick aside, I wouldn't be here, and my dad wouldn't have been alive
mm.
had he not had a love for baseball.
Huh.
And in the Army in World War II, he got himself into a situation where he tried to save some young kids and villagers from starving to death, and
Wow.
was arrested for doing it. And he was on his way to be court-martialed
Wow.
and possibly executed.
My gosh.
And so he's waiting there to be sent back to the States. And it was the World Series between the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marines, the baseball World Series. And the pitcher for the Army threw out his shoulder.
Huh.
And so they needed desperately to find a pitcher.
Huh.
And someone knew that my dad was a really good baseball player, a great pitcher. They
Mm.
said, "Where's this guy DeLuca? He's getting ready to be sent to prison."
Yeah, right.
So
Sure.
they said, "No, we need him." And somebody called the Pentagon and called somebody, and they got this deal for my dad that if you
Wow.
win that World Series, we will drop all of the charges. You'll have to be busted down to private, but you won't go to jail, and you'll be able to have you continue in the military and have an honorable career.
Wow.
So my dad, in that last game, pitched a no-hitter
Oh my gosh.
because his life was on the line, literally.
Literally. Literally.
He dug in and gave it everything he had.
Mm.
He called on every ounce of strength and skill and determination.
Mm.
And that's why he survived. That's why he won. That's why he lived. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm here,
Yeah.
and my
Right.
kids are here, right?
Right.
So, yeah, we can never overemphasize that we all can be put in those situations where we're challenged to dig deep,
Mm.
give it all you have, find the best that you have inside of you, give it 110%.
Wow.
And that could be the difference, in your life and the lives of many other people.
100%. That's an incredible story. They call it the greatest generation for a reason.
Yeah.
They call it the greatest generation for a reason, because there are, that would be rare now, nowadays, I think, but that's great. I can't, I'm somewhat speechless. I'm trying to take it all in myself, and I'm feeling more energized about what I've set out to do myself, just having this conversation. So I think that, it'll be real helpful for people listening, if they haven't listened to your first episode, to definitely go back and listen to that, because when you parallel some of the things you talked about going through, homelessness, to get to uh, working for very successful companies, and creating the life that you created, the family you created, and all those fantastic things, and now helping people to do that for themselves as well. It just makes so much sense that if you hadn't had those experiences, and heck, if your dad hadn't thrown that no-hitter, none of it might have mattered, right? But
No.
if you hadn't have had those experiences growing up,
Yeah.
And I obviously don't want to put words in your mouth, but your ability to not only make it through those things, but to thrive within a very short time after going through something like homelessness, probably would never have happened if you didn't have all those great examples of people to push you through that self-doubt, and that total bottoming out period of your life.
Yeah. I think why being a coach for me is so rewarding, in that a coach's job is to show the individual the greatness inside of them, help them bring that out, bring the creativity. And I have, I'm blessed. I have clients who faced the edge, right? And their businesses were going under, and by working together, they turned their businesses around.
Yeah.
I have people who found the dream job they always wanted in the middle of COVID, right?
Wow.
I have one young lady who couldn't get out of bed and walk because of some injuries and surgery. And it was as much a physical challenge as it was a mental challenge.
100%.
But working together with her, and as a physical therapist, you do little tiny things, one step at a time, one day at a time, but consistent, constant, planned action.
Yes.
And she took her first 15 steps this past week, right?
Awesome. Incredible.
And that 15 will be 20 and 30 and 40, and she'll be walking. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in her mind, before she worked it out with me, she was like, I'm going to be in here forever.
Yeah.
Right. Someday I'll walk, but you having the goal and having the desire and having the dream without having a plan, a process, and daily little bit by little bit action, and a coach, a mentor, a doctor, somebody, a parent, a mentor, you put those things together and success is imminent,
Definitely. Yeah. I would say that my last real take home point here is, if you're someone listening to this that thinks there's no way I could be put in a life or death situation and be asked to do something that I'm really good at and not screw it up. If you're talking to yourself like that as you listen to this episode, reach out to Michael, reach out to somebody, get a good team around you, and have some mentorship, because we all do have that capability, and we can all get away from that self-doubt and that negative self-talk that holds us back from doing those great things of pushing the envelope and all those other fantastic things that we've talked about so far here in this episode. But yes, sometimes we just need help. And I think all of us need help doing that to a degree. because very, very few people are elite enough at what they do to inherently know, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Right. And just automatically have that drive. That's a very unique thing, I think. So, but all of us have the capability to be better and greater than we are right now. Sometimes we just need a little bit of help getting there, I think. And I bet if we ask some of those great people that you talk to and learn from in that Apollo space program, the same thing. I'm sure they had times in their training and whatnot that they had to do the same thing. All those people need coaching, even the elite, elite.
And they did. They all had instructors. They all had leadership. They all had mentors. They all had consulting, engineers and all kinds of people. They all had those people and they use them. And that's the big thing. Yes. If you think that you know everything there is to know and can do it all without any help, it's going to be a long, hard ride.
Yes.
The person who understands, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to find everyone and anyone who can help me, who knows more than I do. In my case, it's pretty much everybody knows more than I do, but that's okay. You find the people who know more than you do and you learn from them and you implement what you learn, and then you grow and you can turn around and help other people. So when we stop learning, we stop living, first of all.
Yes.
But also when we think that we're alone in this and that we don't need any help and we don't want any help, that's we are limiting ourselves and limiting our capabilities.
100%. You nailed that. That's perfect. And I think that's a great place to leave this conversation and let people take what they can out of that. We covered a lot there, Michael.
That's great.
A lot of fantastic lessons. So thank you so much. That was an incredible story and an incredible learning experience. And I hope everyone feels as energized to go be a little bit better the rest of their day and tomorrow moving forward as I am right now, as we're recording this. My juices are definitely flowing. So Michael, thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Phil, thanks so much for having me back. And for everyone out there who's listening and watching, thank you for your time and attention. Please go out there and be the best you, and know that when you try to do that, you are inspiring everybody around you. So thank you in advance for you making the effort.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Yes. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Michael, reach out to him, have questions for him. All of his contact information is in the show notes and description of this episode. So please reach out. If you found any value in this at all, I know I did. I'm sure you did. Please be a friend and tell a friend. Share this with someone else who will find value in this like you did. The whole goal here is to get this information out to people who can then use it to have a greater impact on their lives and the lives of people around them. So go out there, be a friend, tell a friend. As always, love the 5-star rate reviews, the subscribes on YouTube, the video likes. Make sure you're notified whenever new episodes drop so that you can keep learning how to strengthen your true purpose in life. So until next time, thank you again, Michael. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you right back here next time on the Strength for Your Purpose podcast.